Welcome to Plots and Politics. My name is Corinne Strait, back with part 2 of Corruption and Cover-Up, a deep dive into the chronic sexual abuse and lack of accountability in the world of politics, and specifically in the administration of Indianapolis's Mayor Joe Hogsett. Today, we are talking about the story behind the investigation into these allegations that was commissioned by the Indianapolis City Council in the fall of 2024, with the final report being released at the end of May 2025. If you missed part 1, please go check it out. It covers the backstory of one of my guests, survivor of sexual abuse within the Hogsett administration, Lauren Roberts, and her attempts to report what had happened to her. And it also brings in my other guests, Elise Shrock and Morgan Mickelson, when they got involved in this unfolding story, becoming critical allies to Lauren and the other survivors.
Emma Davidson-Tribbs from the National Women's Defense League has echoed that. She said, in their experience, first of all, Democrats close rank around the abuser much faster than Republicans, who tend to sort of find a way to get them out of the way so they stop messing up their strategies, which isn't to give Republicans any credit. They're not actually solving the problem. And also, she said they find a lot of times, especially women in Gen X and older-ish, tend to be pretty hard on the younger women when we come forward. So it's really sad.
I think one concept too that Lauren, Morgan, myself often talk about too when we're talking about this particular situation is the concept of how folks can be both a victim and a perpetrator. And I think there are very few women that exist in this power dynamic in these systems that are not also victims of it, and are oftentimes perpetrators of the abuse. So we have to really think about that, and where accountability still needs to happen with folks who are both survivors and perpetrators. And we see that a lot in these systems. Just speaking as someone who, my experience working as a lobbyist, right? There were often many times where I would be in meetings and I would be the only woman in a group of contract lobbyists with a client, when it was like a consortium, when people would hire multiple lobby firms for a big issue. I would still be one of, if not the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
So women are still fighting for their seat at the table in this system. There are folks who feel, I think, that they are still fighting, so I get mine, and why should I help you fight for yours?
Oh gosh,
and that's really troubling, especially if you are lacking the emotional intelligence to have empathy with the survivor, a sexual assault survivor, somebody who's experiencing workplace abuse. I also think, and this is a great point that I think Ryan Martin with Mirror Indy brought up in a webinar that we did for whistleblowers last month. Lauren led it, and it was amazing. Where he talked about in a lot of nonprofits or other in campaigns, the mission becomes the tool for the abuse. I call it the mythical common good. It's the mythical common good that becomes the tool to excuse abuse, workplace abuse. And there's just no excuse. But people think, oh, we're doing it for the common good. Our community's better. We're all going to martyr ourselves for this. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way.
Yeah.
And I think that lends itself to women in this scenario buying into these narratives and then weaponizing all of that towards one another. And it's patriarchy. It's oppression. It's empire.
And I've heard that common good. I'm so glad you said that. That continues to be incredibly frustrating. I mean, we talked about Senator Niskoski, someone I have worked with in the past, had a lot of respect for, was very disappointed to not only see really what he allegedly has done, but also the response to it. I did get presented with, but look at all of these good things that he's been fighting for all these years. And I remember a similar thing happening when people were talking about even really false equivalencies between, you know, a Bill Clinton and a Donald Trump. And, oh, well, yeah, we've learned all these things about Bill, but look at all the good things that he also did as a Democrat. The justification of again, you said we are all going to be martyrs for this common good is also not true, because you're expecting women to actually be the sacrifice so y'all can go on and do the common good.
And how many amazing, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's so many amazing, well, I think you're about to say the same thing.
Yeah, qualified young women
who can do this job.
Yes. And the people who tend to get into these positions of power have very narcissistic, egocentric personalities, because they're the ones who are willing to do the shittiest stuff to cling to power and abuse people. And it's because we accept it. Like, we really, and I say we as like, you know, voters on the left, or even people who don't consider themselves like part of a political party, which I no longer do, you know, that logic of, well, that's who can win. That's not true anymore. And it actually, I don't think ever was true. We just accepted it, and therefore it kept happening. And as you were saying, Corinne, like, okay, so then women, and I would imagine a lot of people of color, young people, the people with the least power in those situations are going to keep being the sacrifice, and that's not okay. Yeah. Not only is it not okay, it's not effective. Like, look what's happening now. You know, we have a mayor who was never that good at his job, but now his impact is unraveling even more because of all the stuff that's happening. It's a risk to stick with abusers.
Absolutely. And Morgan, I wanted to jump to you. Your time came to an end with the Hogsett administration in what year?
Last year, September 2024.
What finally made you decide to leave?
It was shortly after the summer in which the news broke. I was facing a lot of pushback of just that, and I was finally waking up to this toxic environment that we were working in, realizing that, you know, I didn't have to stay in this. I actually got another job offer though, so I was very privileged in that way to be able to take the opportunity to exit when I could. But I was really sad, you know, left a great team. I was doing some work that I loved. There was some really, you know, the unprecedented funding opportunities from the Biden administration were still in play. And so it was leaving at a really unfortunate time for me.
And after the articles came out in the summer, eventually the Indianapolis City-County Council decided to launch an investigation. How did y'all learn that was happening, how it was going to be conducted, et cetera? How did y'all learn about that process?
Staff learned about it from mostly from the media, unfortunately.
The media, once again, a hero here, God.
Truly. There were maybe a couple tweets from the mayor that we learned about things from. Finally, after enough screaming, there was one or two internal memos circulated that, you know, were totally insincere, though.
Mm-hmm. I obviously heard about it from the media because I've just been kind of a bystander of support and not working on any official, you know, means. So I had been hearing about it just as someone who was trying to use what power I could to advocate. I mean, there have been a couple, I would say I could count on one hand, but it's like less than that, counselors that I had felt safe enough that I could go to, that I could talk to and advocate for next steps. You know, Counselor Andy Nielsen was really my go-to to say, you know, what's the deal? How are we moving forward? And I felt like he heard me, and that's kind of how eventually I learned what was going on. And I'll let Lauren talk a little bit more.
Take it from here. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the other named survivor and I got very played by some of the Democrats on city council. She had relationships with them that I didn't, because I was briefly on the campaign and then briefly in my job after that. And then I left Indy for a few years and kind of stayed out of stuff because of what happened. But she had worked in the administration until pretty recently, as well as some other, closely affiliated organizations and other people. So, I don't remember exactly the first time I heard about an investigation, like maybe someone released a statement or something, but the City-County Council president, a Democrat named Vop Osili. Vop is a nickname he gave himself to mean voice of the people. His real name is Samuel, but I'll call him Vop just to keep things simple. I think they had gotten wind that I were going to attend the City-County Council meeting, I think on August 12th, to listen to the mayor give his remarks, not just about the budget, but about what happened. That was the first time he was going to be speaking publicly on it, as far as I knew. So Vop texted and asked for a meeting. We were going to go in person. Oh, he asked for the meeting with him, us two survivors, and then Council Vice President Allie Brown. I requested that Jessica McCormick, the Ethics Committee Chairwoman and City Councilor, be part of it, just because I did not trust these people. I know, I don't know for a fact, I can't prove it, but I know they saw my tweets and all those things over the years. I've heard on good authority that Bob had used his knowledge of my, previous public statements before I went to the press to leverage different things with the mayor's administration over the years to get things he wanted. I'm jaded and it's
so
well
dark.
earned.
Like everybody's going to use it. Like everybody's just using it as a weapon, and really like nobody gives a shit what is happening.
No one gives a shit.
Real people.
Yeah. And that's part of why I've written so extensively about the impact. Because I'm like, while you all were using me and continue to use me and arguably abuse me still, I was like really not okay for many years. Still not okay, and it's like, they don't give a shit. So we get on this Zoom that I, recorded on my phone, because I will record everything if it's legal, because I don't trust anybody, rightfully so. And I'm so glad I did that, where, the two women, Vop made a big point of like, I'm going to let them take the lead, which is code I've learned now for Vop just sort of lets women take the hits for him. He kind of keeps himself in the background when it's risky. He did that to Krista Carlino with the investigative committee that eventually happened. But Allie and Jessica, tears, saying how sorry they were that this happened. Allie, I think, even said like she wants to break Thomas's jaw. That's how angry she was. Obviously, she didn't mean that literally, but Allie and I had also exchanged Instagram DMs in 2019 when she was first running for council. And I told her most of what happened. At the time, I was like, I'm not up for like pushing this anymore. I've been trying and it's awful. But I know she shared with me that she had tried to advocate behind the scenes at state party a little bit. But like, she was still on council, and this was, she overlapped with the time Thomas Cook was in the administration, and like she could have done more. So anyway, we have this bullshit meeting. I call out, I'm like, Bop, or do you still have the same fundraising consultant as Joe? Like I'm immediately like, what's actually going on here? They basically, without saying it, were asking us not to say too much publicly about pushing for an investigation, because they're internally still figuring it out. They want it to be truly independent. They want to make sure that Republicans don't like seize on it the way they're trying to, because they're not going to make sure that survivors are protected in the process, which may have been true. I don't know. We definitely weren't protected in the process that happened. But it was a version of the same conversation over and over behind the scenes with other Democrats on council who really are just playing the same game as Vop and Allie were. Jessica, I don't know her intentions, but she was on that call too. My understanding, and people can check out Jesse Brown's newsletter for the breakdown, but essentially some legislation gets written and passed by council in August at the meeting where Joe spoke. What I now understand is Vop was interfering with the scope of this investigation the entire time. Krista Carlino was made chair, but she has now said publicly, while she's calling for Joe's resignation now, that she was cut out of a lot of the conversations with Fisher Phillips, the firm that was ultimately hired by council for now almost $500,000 to do this. And yeah, it's just been a nightmare. Like we survivors, so they named one me, and then there was an anonymous woman who went on the record with us too for both stories last summer. You know, we had pushed for an investigation. We publicly called for it, but not this. This was re-traumatizing, victim blaming, very much designed to protect the mayor. It was a money grab from these law firms, both, in my opinion, Fisher Phillips, who did the investigation, and then Bakery Drinker that the mayor hired to defend isn't the right word, but represent the administration in dealing with it. And now that Krista Carlino is speaking publicly about it, we have a better understanding of what actually happened.
We have a little better idea, and it is close to, because I'm never going to say that I'm great at math, but doing just so quick numbers, the Fisher Phillips investigation that was ordered by the council and passed by the council is around $450,000 to Fisher Phillips, and then I believe Bakery Drinker that Joe hired was close to $45,000. So we're really close to the $500,000 mark just for this investigation that comes out with. I mean, to say a less than satisfying report is a gross understatement. Reading the report, I believe it was May 30th, May 29th or so that the report came out. And knowing now that no one who participated in the investigation from a survivor standpoint was aware that the report was being released public, what information was going to be included, because obviously this is incredibly sensitive subject matter. You didn't know. Nobody knew until it was released to the committee. And once again, I believe the media had to get everybody a copy of the report. Tell me your experience, and this for all of you, reading that report.
Well, I mean, it was traumatic before we even got to read it because, Morgan and I were in the meeting, and Lauren and I, were communicating because, in solidarity with Lauren and other survivors, we're like ready to help them process this information. And we are trying to be the hands and feet on the ground in the committee. And so when 5:30 hits and they still haven't received the report, their lawyers haven't received the report starts airing all of this incorrect information for the public to hear before they even have the time to process it. And it was just like, again, like you're re-traumatizing the people you're supposedly doing this for, which we don't believe that's what they're doing it for, but doing this for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like we're seeing on full display a system and a party that lacks the muscle to call itself into accountability. Because that's when I'm texting the Democrats on the committee and I'm saying, they don't have the report. We need to pause. So in my mind, I'm like, they're going to see this text. They have the gavel. They have the power. They will pause the committee. And staff can just send the report. I've been a staffer. I know what it's like to work quickly behind the scenes. Like they can direct them to do this. Okay. Nobody answers. Okay. I say, I will disrupt this committee. I do not want to disrupt this committee. I will disrupt this committee. This is unacceptable. We're 15 minutes in. This is happening.
I'm texting Krista too, by the way. Like she and I had been in touch throughout the week, and she's telling me, we won't have the report until it goes public, which already sucked. And we had asked through our lawyer and directly to Fisher Phillips. I had asked Krista individually, can we please have an advance copy? No. It's explained to me the Republicans are going to try to use this as something with their PR strategy to kill all this other funding. I don't
willing to sign an NDA.
Yeah, I offered to sign an NDA. I'm like, I will not leak this. I'll share it with my lawyer. But other than that, I just want to know what's about to be said about me in this public forum. And just to be clear, what Elise is explaining, in that meeting, the counselors, by the way, it leaked to some of the counselors beforehand, of course. Like I heard that through the grapevine. So that sucked. And I let Krista know she hadn't heard that. I start hearing Joe might attend the meeting himself. So I'm like, clearly someone on his team might have heard what's going on. I don't know. But Fisher Phillips remotely is presenting like their little PowerPoint on what's in the report. And this is the first time we survivors are hearing what's in the report. We still don't have it in front of us. So I can't even flip ahead to figure out what other bombshells are coming. And they're getting very silly little details, in some cases incorrect, like things that I documented for them. Like, I was not a state Democratic Party employee. IDP told me that in an email. Here's the email. I have this MOU or memorandum of understanding between IDP and Joe Hogsett from August 2014, before I ever started, that explicitly says IDP processes payroll and benefits. We are not your team's employer. These are attorneys who made so much money per hour, and they couldn't even like confirm that detail. They also, were over and over saying the mayor said, or even like stating certain things as fact that we had documentation to disprove. And they kept saying, I was identified as complainant 1, the other survivor complainant 2. It was obviously us. They even named her employer, and it was so not cool. We were not kept anonymous at all. Which is why I didn't do like an open-ended interview, because they wouldn't record it. So I gave them a written statement because I knew I just had a bad feeling about it. But they kept saying we were claiming XYZ. And so it was just very misogynistic, intentionally or not. It was very sloppy, in my opinion. And to me, it's like they really weren't interested in getting at the truth. But sorry, I interrupted. So Elise, like, you're in the meeting.
No, yeah, that context is good.
Yeah, she's not answering me.
And so I've grown up in Robert's rules, right? I have staffed these committees. I am just generally someone who is there taking committee notes, a bystander. It is not normal for me to like just disrupt things. But there comes a time when you have to center survivors, and you have to like decenter what's happening, like the system, to call into account the larger picture of what is happening and to protect people. And these survivors were not feeling safe. It was like I was just feeling the panic on the other side of the phone. And so I just said, hey, so I raised my voice and I spoke out of turn, and I was out of order. And I said, Councilwoman Carlino is someone who I've had a friendly relationship with for a very long time. I had to make a decision to do that. And it felt like shit to do that. But it needed to happen, because I thought, okay, certainly once I say they don't have to report, I will say this, we'll pause, we'll get the report to these survivors. Still didn't happen. Instead, I'm in some type of weird back and forth over why I'm even raising my voice. The presentation is still happening. I'm being threatened to say, like, if I can't stand down, I have to leave. And so I'm just like, and this is to me where, like, if the Democratic Party had come out months ago and said, we do not condone this, we are going to not support this, we are going to not fundraise, we are not going to allow Joe Hogsett to have access to Van, we are not going to allow him to have any of our supports until this has been accounted for and full accountability has been met, and justice, according to the survivors, has been sufficiently met. I feel like Chairwoman Carlino would have had the knowledge behind her to say, yeah, okay, let's pause. She would have had that information. She would have had that muscle to say, okay, I have some knowledge of what should happen. But because no other leadership has made strong, bold statements, it leaves people in the moment like this without the muscle to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not to mention, she was also, Chairwoman Carlina was navigating, like, now that she's spoken publicly, I think it's okay
Now
to say
we
this.
know.
But she was getting so much pressure behind the scenes not to let me speak at all.
Yeah.
She hasn't said that specifically, but that's what I'm picking up from what she has shared publicly. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that, but that her whole process, her leadership was very much undercut, interfered with. And I'm really grateful, Elise and Morgan, to you two for being in the room, because Morgan and then another friend of ours were also there as former staffers very recently, holding signs saying, like, no, I forget what did you all actually end up writing on them? I forget.
Abuse hasn't stopped. Protect workers, not Joe. Hogsett HR is a joke. Elise made the beautiful signs for us.
Way to go, Elise. Way to go. Morgan, what was it like for you being in the room for that report?
It was tough.
The report.
I didn't expect it to be so tough. I've been a staff, much like Elise described, of like adhering to Robert's rules. I felt that was so brave of both of you, Elise and Lauren, to disrupt in that way. I don't know if I could have done it, just, being the rule follower that I am and whatnot, but it was absolutely necessary. And I so wish they had a more emotionally intelligent response.
Yeah.
And let's note that if they had, shared that report beforehand with both the survivors and amongst the counselors, they could have asked their questions. They would have had time to prepare to ask their questions to Phillips Fisher in that meeting, rather than reacting on the fly, not knowing what they're seeing. And now this past Tuesday, they were all talking about, well, we haven't had any time to actually ask our questions, and talking about how much more would it cost to bring him back again.
So yeah, talking about Robert's rules, talking about I think we're all very familiar with like public notification of a public meeting, and it's going in these media sources 48 hours before, and people are getting the packet and yada, yada, yada. Like, to think that this giant report is just plopped in front of them when the meeting begins at 5:30 is ridiculous. And yeah, and a huge waste of time, because you're not able to comb through all. It's just so silly. And so that committee meeting happens, which again, as if this entire investigation seems as if it was an exercise in futility. That meeting feels so as well. A couple of weeks later, or a week and a half-ish later, June 9th, a city council meeting comes around where they are now needing to consider the additional appropriation of $300,000 to finish paying the Fisher Phillips bill, because they'd only appropriated $150 so far. And Lauren, you flew your behind across the country to be here in person. That night, for anyone who has not seen it, there is plenty of video going on, but the decision, it does seem to be, it appeared, at least watching the meeting, the number of sheriff's deputies who were present, which struck me as odd, knowing how many are usually there, that everything felt like it was a setup against Lauren. Thank you so much for being here for part 2. Part 3 is going to be coming out on Monday, June 30th, and we are going to pick up this story with the explosive Indianapolis City-County Council meeting that took place on June 9th. If you want early access to all 4 parts of our 2-hour conversation, consider becoming a paid subscriber on my Substack, and you will get them directly to your inbox, corinnestraight.substack.com.